I want to begin by saying what an honor it is to be here and to spend time with all of you in front of these wonderful deities, God Nitai. I wanted to request your blessings so we can have an honest interaction over the next, however long we have, and to explore this topic, this idea of the search for happiness. And I was thinking, actually, what I'll do is I'll just say quickly some prayers. These prayers are called Mangalacharyan. And Mangalacharyan means an auspicious invocation. And the idea is that with these prayers, whoever hears them and recites them literally receives good fortune. So we often say these prayers before speaking to help to bring in more of the Lord's blessings as we engage in some discussion that can really uplift us all. So I'll just say these prayers and then we'll go from there. Yeah? Chekshu militam yenatas my Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakatamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchikapatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudi Gaura Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So can everyone see this? So we have this cup, and in the cup it has some water. And if someone wants to experience what's in the cup, it has to be full. Right? It has to have something inside it. And when it has something inside it, then something can be nurtured, something can be nourished, but also something can be shared. In the same way, when we talk about the pursuit of happiness, we're talking about the pursuit inside. I'm going to just leave that initial point, but we'll come back to it. There's a story that I came across during the pandemic. It was a story of a king, and the king had 4 wives. Okay. The first wife is the wife the king loved the most. And with this particular wife, the king, he dressed her in fine robes, and he would feed her really wonderful delicacies, and she was his favorite. So that was the king's first wife. The second wife, the king also loved, and he would show this wife off to neighboring kingdoms and so on, and he felt very happy to have this wife and etc. That was a second wife. The king had a third wife. And with his third wife, she was very intelligent. And the king would actually ask her for advice on political matters, and he loved that wife as well. The king had a fourth wife, and it was interesting. She was very loyal and very supportive of the king. But of the 4 wives, she was the one that he neglected. Okay, so we'll take that again. The first wife was the king's favorite. He would feed her many delicacies, dress her in fine clothes and so on. The second wife, also the king loved. He would show her off to neighboring kings, neighboring kingdoms. The third wife was very intelligent, The king loved to speak to her and he would get her advice on different things. He also loved her. The fourth wife was the one that the king would neglect, even though she was incredibly loyal and supportive. So the relationship between the king and his wives carried on over a long period of time. Until one day. At one point, the king received some news, because he'd started to see signs of illness and sickness, and he had some medical specialists and doctors, and they would do a diagnosis, and they came to the conclusion that he was dying. And of course, he was devastated. I'm going to pass away. And then he thought about his wives, and he thought, I've looked after these 4 wives. I'm sure that they'll come with me as I go into death. So the first thing he did is he went to his favorite wife, the wife that he had really loved the most, fed, clothed, etc. And he said to her, he said, I'm dying. And the king said to her, please, will you come with me, into death? And the first wife, she said, absolutely no way. No way, I'll never come with you. And she turned away and just immediately walked away from the king. And of course, the king, he was devastated. Like, wow, she's just completely turned me away. And this was the wife that he loved the most. He loves the others as well, but she was his favorite. He loved her the most. She said, no way, I'll never come with you. Turned around, immediately walked away. After a while, the king managed to compose himself. He thought, okay, at least I'll go to the second wife. He approached his second wife and he explained the situation. He said, I'm dying. Please, I've loved you. I've cared for you. Please, will you come with me? And the second wife, she said to him, she said, no way. I'll never come with you. And then she said to him, she said, actually, when you die, I'm going to remarry. Yeah, maybe some marriage counselors in the house, right? But she said, when you die, I'm gonna remarry. No way, I'll never come with you. Again, the king was so pained in hearing this. He went to the third wife. Again, this is a wife who was, very intelligent, very well spoken, and for years he would take her advice on political matters. He said to her, look, I'm dying, Will you come with me into death? And she said, I'm very, very sorry. She said, I can only come to you. I can only come with you to the grave, right? So I'll be there at your funeral, but then I can't go any further than that. That's what she said to him. And then the king heard a voice. The voice was the voice of his 4th wife, and she said to him, I'll come with you. She said, I'll come with you, I'll be with you. Wherever you go, whatever situation you're in, I will always be there. I will always go with you. The king actually felt ashamed. He felt, this person, of all my 4 wives, this wife who I've been neglecting all this time for so many years, he felt so ashamed that he'd neglected her, and she was the wife who was the most loyal to him. So this is a story that I heard quite some years ago. What was really interesting was that the 4 wives represented something. Those 4 wives, they all represented something. The first wife, who the king had fed wonderful delicacies to, and he clothed her, the first wife represented the physical body. The physical body, given so much time, energy, attention, and so on, but at the time of death, first to leave. First to leave. Never come back. The second wife represented wealth and status and possessions. So, that second wife, the king had showed off to the neighboring kingdoms, right? Look what I've got. Okay. But she said, when you pass away, I'll remarry, because the wealth and the possessions when we pass away, they go to someone else. That was the second wife. The third wife, who the king asked, who said, I'll come with you to the grave, but I can come with you no further than that. She represents friends and family. So our friends and family, they'll be there for us in life, but they can't go with us any further than the grave, any further than the funeral. The fourth wife, the one who was loyal and said, I will come with you no matter where you go, no matter what situation you're in, that fourth wife represents the soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, the first teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna he says something which, when I first read that statement, I didn't understand the power of what Krishna was saying. In this conversation of the Bhagavad Gita that takes place on the battlefield, Krishna tells Arjuna, he says, Dehinos minyata dehi, komran yovanam dera, tata dehantara praptir, dera tatra namuyate. He says, Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, I want you to understand that you're not this body. This Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the most famous conversations throughout the entire history of the world. The Bhagavad Gita, which is a crest jewel of Vedic Eastern spiritual wisdom. In that same literature, Krishna begins the journey in this way. You're not this body. When I first came across the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita over 26 years ago, I remember reading it. But have you ever had that experience where you hear something but you don't quite understand the power of it? Have you ever had that kind of experience? I had that experience. It's like I heard the words, but I didn't understand the power and the significance of those words. And over many years, as I started to explore this teaching of Krishna consciousness, certain things started to become clear to me. What I discovered in the pages of the Bhagavad Gita was not just a book of wisdom. What I was being offered, what I understood over many years that I was being offered, was literally like a series of lenses on reality. I understood that what was being given in this ancient text was literally a way of seeing reality in such a way that I would have a very profound perception of what would truly make a person happy. It struck me. In fact, again, I want to have a very honest conversation. I had a conversation with my wife this morning. We were actually I was meant to be on a 2-hour call this morning, working on one project, which we're still working on. But then, because my wife, because she'd had some sleep issue, insomnia, so instead we were speaking. And it was a very interesting dialogue because, again, I got that sense of the profound power of this Bhagavad Gita wisdom. So we were talking, and the starting point for the conversation was around that desire to progress in life, that desire to make a change in life, that desire to make things happen in life. And it was such a profound conversation. And the reason why it was such a profound conversation is, as we were talking, the inspiration of the Bhagavad Gita started working some magic within me. And there was a realization that started to bubble up into my consciousness that really, it shocked me, it shocked us, and it was like a complete 360 revision on how we were seeing the world, how we were seeing life, how we were seeing ourselves. As we got into the conversation, it became more and more apparent that there were two types of progression that could go on in an individual's life. There was one type of progression whereby the person was constantly trying to do things external. And what became apparent to me was that that path was the norm, right? So someone gets a promotion, or someone moves house, or someone gets a pay rise. So there were so many external things. And it became clear to me that usually, maybe we can, okay. And it became clear to me that usually that was the usual marker for promotion or progress, let's say. And what started to dawn on my wife and I as we were speaking is that we realized, and it was something that we saw that Christian was working in our own lives. What became crystal clear to us was that within our own lives, Krishna was so kind that he was working another type of progression. It became crystal clear to us that the progression that Krishna was offering us was a progression within. So these two things, one type of the search for happiness, and the normal type of, or the normal consideration of happiness is a progression outside. And there's nothing wrong with the progression outside. These things will happen automatically, these things will happen naturally. But the issue was something that Krishna had talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. He said this mata spastas tu kunteya shitoshna sukha dukkata. He explained to Arjuna, he said the difficulty when your happiness is dependent upon externals is that when things will go up, you will go up. And he explained to Arjuna, he said when things will go down, you will also go down. So what he was really explaining is that the standard of material pursuit, he was explaining to Arjuna, this is the roller coaster. I was giving this presentation a while ago to a group, I think it was a group of students. I said that if there's something to gain materially, then there's something to lose. Right? And what I understood more and more was that Krishna was saying that happens automatically, that material world is up and down. But he was saying that there's another standard of happiness that you can have alongside everything else. And it became clear to me that he was offering Arjuna another standard of happiness which was unshakable. Now this really kick-started a revolution in my own mind, because I had some understanding about these points before, and this conversation that I had with my wife, it took it to a completely different level. What became clear to us is that if a person themselves goes on an inner journey of transformation, then the special quality of that is that person, the treasure that they get from the inner journey, it stays with them everywhere. That means you can be in England, you can be in China, you can be in India, you can be at the top of society, you can be at the bottom of the society, but because the treasure's inside you, you're able to reproduce it. You see what I mean? It's just like sometimes there are certain people, they can produce a result only under certain circumstances. Do you know what I'm talking about? In other words, when certain facility is there, then they can produce an outcome. But if the facility ever goes, they can't do anything. They're completely stuck because it's an external thing. And then there are some people, wherever you put them, because that skill, that talent, that capability, that expertise is within them, wherever you put them, they can become successful. So what became increasingly apparent to me is that the external world is the external world, and external movements happen anyway, right? So you get the job, you do these different things, and Krishna wasn't denying that. In the pages of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna wasn't denying that. But what he was saying to Arjuna was something even more profound. He was saying that if you know what? If you know Jama, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, and Darshanam, if you know that your body's going to go through changes, birth, old age, disease, death. If you know that these things are going to happen automatically, he was telling Arjuna, then someone who's really intelligent, someone who's really smart, what they will do is that they will make an investment that will last no matter the changes. That really struck me. In fact, over the years, through reading Bhagavad Gita and others, it became more apparent that Krishna was giving not just books of wisdom, but an entire system of how to prepare for life, how to prepare for death. He was saying, first of all, we should be mature enough to see what's inevitable. Okay? For example, many of you'll have some preparations for when you pass away, right? It may be a will, it may be like, this is what I want to happen, this is what I want to happen with the property, all these types of things. Because as mature people, you first see what's inevitable. It's inevitable that this is going to happen. Therefore, rather than closing my eyes and sticking my head in the ground, if it's inevitable, let me just make some arrangement for it to make sure that things will be good. And in one sense, the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is explaining that whole point. It's inevitable that the body goes through changes. Did anyone, when I was younger, they still have it now. You heard about these supermodels, right? Does anyone remember Linda Evangelista? She was one of the supermodels, right? So there was an interesting thing. I mean, because she disappeared off the radar for years. And people used to think, what happened to her? What happened was she had some surgery done. She did some surgery to actually work, to make sure her figure was of a certain type. And the surgery had gone badly wrong. The surgery had gone badly wrong. And as a result, she went into hiding. Now get this. This person adored by millions of people around the world, multi-millionaire, minimum, maybe even more than that, okay? Celebrity circuit, television programs, TV shows, celebrity, endorsements, events, being chased by big brands to endorse those different products. But again, the body goes through changes. So when it was good, looked amazing. But that change in the body, which actually we know is inevitable. Even if it wasn't some kind of surgery that went wrong, the body goes through changes. To the extent that she was elated by the fame, to that extent, she would be completely devastated by the change. What I saw, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita was an incredible text that was giving me an opportunity to get off the roller coaster of material duality. That's what I saw. It was saying, look, we're not saying that don't do these material things, these material social duties, etc. There's a place for all of them. It wasn't negating that reality, right? And as I was, introduced, I have a full-time job, I'm married, etc. It wasn't negating that reality, but it was pointing out a deeper reality that actually the body and the external situations go through all kinds of changes. Right now, we have a cost of living crisis. Is anyone seeing that? Right? Prices have gone up, right? Mm-hmm. Just slightly, right? Gas, electricity, all these different things. Situation. I mean, there was a movie. I think it was Netflix, either movie or series called Contagion. Anyone heard of that? It was on Netflix, and that was very, very popular just before the pandemic. And you know what the storyline of that movie, of that program was? What happens if there's a global pandemic that hits society? Isn't that incredible? If you'd have told me that, Ed, Bhuta Bhavana 2020, right? Around February, March 2020, practically the entire world is going to go into lockdown. I just said you're drinking something that's a bit too strong, right? Someone's put something in your tea, okay? But absolutely incredible. We live in amazing times, where we have to learn to navigate the unexpected. And again, it really spoke to me. My spiritual master said something, and I'm seeing it becoming true in front of my eyes. He said that there will become a time where people will have to be spiritual even to maintain themselves on a human level, in a human way. And we're seeing that. Increasingly, people taking to mindfulness to steady the mind because there's so much unsteadiness in society. Increasingly, people looking at different ways to engage in internal disciplines, meditative disciplines, in order to balance and be stable because there's so much change in the world. And therefore, I started to see that Krishna consciousness was literally the spiritual toolkit for the 21st century. It was literally the toolkit for spiritual survival and spiritual growth amidst the storm of the 21st century. I started to look around to see the people that I knew. And I saw that there were certain people, because they'd gone deep into their spiritual practice, into their reading of the Bhagavad Gita. I saw that they'd sometimes gone through more than other people. And that struck me. I thought, hold on, it doesn't make sense. This person's gone through more challenges and they're more stable. This other person's gone through less challenges and they're completely thrown by everything. And I was like, I don't get it. How come? They've gone through more and they're less affected. They've gone through less and they're more affected. How is it possible? And it really became clear to me that it was a question of consciousness. That search for happiness was also, by definition, a search for stability, a search for that deep place within ourselves, whereby no matter what was happening externally, that we were very, very deeply grounded in a certain type of strength, in a certain type of power, in a certain type of wisdom, in a certain type of joy that no one could take away from us. It really struck me. It became more and more clear, And what I started to see was that everyone who I saw who was really perceptive, they were pulling something into their spiritual bank account and they didn't wait for the emergency. It was amazing. I saw again and again that the most sharp, perceptive, intelligent, and wise people that I knew in any area of life, they were pulling something away into their spiritual bank account. They didn't wait for the challenge. They didn't wait for the difficulty. They didn't wait for the emergency. What they were doing is that they were so sharp, they thought, let me build my spiritual strength. Let me build my spiritual connection. Let me build my spiritual happiness inside. So that whatever happens externally, I will still always have access to a deep strength, which allows me to weather the storm. I'll always have access to a deep joy, which allows me to carry that wherever I go, The reason why I talked about this cup is because I saw so many people, and it's a mistake that I made in the past. I saw so many people who wanted to give, but their cup wasn't full. Can anyone relate to that? People who wanted to get out of really great desire to give, but they hadn't done this. They hadn't received. And because they hadn't received, what do you think happened when they tried to give to other people? If they kept trying to give, what will eventually happen to them? Any guesses?
They'll have less themselves.
Have less themselves, definitely. What else? They became empty. They became completely depleted. They had all this good intention, but they weren't receiving. They hadn't filled their own cup. And so in their desire to give, because that's also part of what makes us happy, that desire to serve, to contribute, because they hadn't filled their own cup, even as they tried to give, it became problematic. And I saw that the Bhagavad Gita was giving me, it was literally, I tell you, it was like I was being shown, this is a way out of this dilemma. You don't have to be like that. That's what I was being shown. That if you connect, if you have a spiritual connection in your life, you have an unending, inexhaustible source of strength, joy, and wisdom that will carry you through any and every challenge that life can bring to you. I thought, wow, I couldn't believe it. The Bhagavad Gita was showing me that Bhuta Bhavana, tap you on the shoulder, psst, have a look. This is what's actually being offered to you. In the pages of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes a very powerful point. He says, Machata, Madgata Prana, Bodhayanta Parasparam, Kasayantischa, Mam Nityam, Tusyanticha Ramanticha. I like that verse because it just sounds beautiful. Tusyanticha Ramanticha. He says to Arjuna, he says, my devotees are experiencing great bliss and satisfaction from enlivening each other about me. It struck me. It struck me that the issues that I'd seen between families, the issues I'd seen in workplaces, the issues and conflicts I'd seen in communities was all linked to this same thing, was all linked to people whose cups were empty. And because their cups were empty, then it led to conflicts, negativity, politics, criticism. I noticed that the people whose cups were full, they didn't have any of these issues. It really helped me to understand just how much we as a modern society, we had replaced deep contentment, deep spiritual fullness, a full cup. We'd replaced that with external stimulation. Right? You know, even the way that modern technology is designed is constantly just to distract people's attention, to stimulate people. So most people, they were getting lots of stimulation, but they didn't have any deep fullness, deep joy. And this lesson just kept coming to me. Krishna was like, I'm giving you a way out. You don't have to go that way. You don't have to go through that difficulty. So Krishna consciousness and this teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful. It's so powerful that it's easy to miss. What the purpose of this is that if the happiness is something that's coming on a deep level, that's coming from a spiritual nourishment, it makes you one of the most powerful people in your families, in your communities, in your nations, in the entire world. Because you carry that potency of joy, that potency of happiness, and it spills over from you into anyone and everyone. Not just happiness. A Krishna conscious person, they carry deep spiritual strength. They carry deep, profound spiritual wisdom. So they can really see what's the root of the problem. Otherwise, what we have in modern society, we try to address or adjust all the symptoms, and the root cause isn't being addressed. Our founder, Srila Prabhupada, would often talk about this point. He would talk about watering the root of the tree. Sometimes you can hear something so often it becomes, we miss its significance. He would talk about watering the root of the tree. And the whole idea was that dehi nosminyata dehi. If I'm the soul, if I'm not this body, if the body is a vehicle that I'm in, then just stimulating the body, just stimulating the mind, just stimulating the intelligence, while neglecting the real me, the real self deep inside, the thing that animates this vehicle. It became so clear to me that that's what was the issue within the modern society. We had forgotten, we had neglected the nourishment for the real self. That was a real issue behind divorces. It was a real issue behind family breakups. It was a real issue behind community conflicts. It was all coming from people who would deeply feel a deep kind of emptiness. There's something that's not quite right. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to. I'm ticking all these boxes, but in my heart, I can feel there's something that's missing. And without being able to understand it and to nourish that, literally our entire world was responding with conflicts. So this was a game changer for me. This is why whenever I speak to people, I always see that the Bhagavad Gita is profoundly practical. Because your happiness is practical. It is the individual with the full heart, with the heart filled with deep happiness and contentment, who is able to be tolerant even in the face of challenges, isn't it? We've all seen it. Sometimes someone was even maybe negative to you or a bit rude, but you were in a good space. You had a good day. So even though they're being a little bit rude, you didn't take it personally. I'm sure they've just had a bad day. Don't really take it. Just, what they say, water off a duck's back, isn't it? And then there's other times in our life, and we've all seen it, when the cup's empty. And because the cup is empty, even someone does one slight thing, bang, I'm going to kill them. What's going on? We're completely explosive. So what it really teaches us, what Krishna is showing us, it's all based upon what's in the heart. Our ability to make a difference in the world, in our communities, within ourselves, is all coming down to what's in the heart. And Krishna consciousness is the science of how to keep your heart full. So it's not just a science of happiness. It's a science of a deep happiness, a deep fulfillment, a deep contentment. And it's that kind of contentment, that kind of strength, that kind of resilience, which will allow us throughout every single situation in our lives to respond in the best and most loving way. I often share with people this statement: the love you give pursues you. The love you give to other people, the way that you respond, that love that you give is an energy that comes back. But to give love, to give it consistently and deeply, we need to be receiving it from a source which is inexhaustible. And that source, Aham Savasya Pravavo, Mata Savam Pravartate, Iti Matva Bhajante Mam, Buddha Bhava Samambhataha. That source of everything, the Sava, Karana, Karanam, that is Krishna. So on this day, as we're coming together, we want to remind each other, please know the gift of the Bhagavad Gita, the gift that's before you, and please know how practical it is. I'm always trying to go a bit deeper. What's the root cause of what's going on? And I've seen it. I can honestly say that I've seen it. The root cause of our success in life, in anything, even external things, is to make sure that this heart is full of bliss, full of strength, full of wisdom. We need to keep the heart full so we can keep the relationships healthy. And the primary way that the Bhagavad Gita is directing us to do this is by calling upon those names of Krishna and engaging in some service to Krishna. It is considered that the Supreme Personality of Godhead He loves each and every person more than we love ourselves. He loves us more than we love ourselves. In fact, it is said that the most important thing to know about Krishna is that he loves you. When I was in America recently, we were speaking to some students, and it was very interesting because what I realized that they didn't know is that generally, when people hear about anything religious, you hear about these rules and regulations. You got to do this, you got to do that. Don't do that, God won't like it. You know, if you do that, God's gonna mess you up, man. He'll mess you up real bad. You know, like that. It's this kind of idea. But what we learn in the Bhagavad Gita is that when Krishna's giving some direction, he's doing it. He's advising us to live a certain way because he loves us. It's like, dude, if you do this, it will help you in this way. Like, dude, I recommend that you do that because if you do that, you'll get this. We're not worshipping a selfish God. So when he's giving any direction, it's because it will benefit us, and that's a huge paradigm shift. It's a huge paradigm shift. When I speak to youth, I often see that they've not been taught that. So oftentimes when they're taught something, it's like, don't do this, don't do that. It's like, oh my God, I'm restricted in this way, that way. Flip the script, think about it. If everyone who was involved or interested in some genuine God-conscious pursuit, if they were explained, God's telling you to do this because this is how it will benefit you. God's recommending you to do this because this is how it will benefit you. God's recommending that we live this way because this is how you'll achieve the great happiness and ecstasy that you're looking for. Amazing, isn't it? Can you see how it feels different? You know, in Krishna consciousness therefore begins where religion ends. Did you know that? Krishna consciousness begins where religion ends. Religion means that you believe in God and then you go about your life. Krishna consciousness means that now that you know that he exists, what are the relationships between you and him? What's the loving exchange between you and him? How is he going to show you? I really care about you. I'm so glad that you came to the program today. Right? I have so much affection for you. So I'm going to give you this realization or that realization because man is in the religion business, God is in the relationship business. So, real happiness, rasa, this mellow, this taste, this means relationship for us. And we really, from the heart, I want to encourage you. Whatever else you do, I really want to encourage you. Definitely practice this Krishna consciousness. Don't take my word for it. It's an experiment. You will see amazing miracles, and interestingly enough, as much as you'll see amazing things happen around you, the most amazing thing is what you will see happen within you. This is the treasure. This is the power. This is how Krishna wants to help us, to make the heart full of spiritual strength, full of spiritual wisdom, and full of this deep spiritual joy, so that whatever we go through in our lives, we can experience it from the best position. I was in America years ago, and we went to visit, I think it was the Empire State Building. So when I came in on the ground floor, you had all the taxis outside, the traffic, all the noise, and then you go up the building. And so I was on some high floor, and then I looked out the window and I could see all the traffic, it's the same traffic, same vehicles, same cars, but because of where I was, there was no disturbance. So the same experience, but experienced from a different point of view. And I saw that that's what Krishna consciousness was offering me. That if I was to practice developing my Krishna consciousness, then the world would not affect me in the same way. The world would no longer affect me in the same way. I would be literally, as the saying goes, I'd be literally able to be in the world, but not of the world. So I know what's going on. I could understand what's going on, but without being brought down by it. And I saw, even amongst my friends, I saw the ones who went deep they were having amazing experiences. They had that strength, that joy. The cup was always full because they kept connecting with Krishna. And I saw that the ones who got tricked into, don't, this spiritual stuff, you don't have to do that spiritual stuff. It's okay, you could just do material things. You know, look on the television, look on the internet. So this person looks really, really happy, right? These, you know, with social media, it's like that. You see people smiling, and it's like it takes 1 second to take the picture. That doesn't mean that that's how they're living. You understand what I'm saying? So I wanted to encourage you, to encourage us. We've been given something incredibly special. I promise you, I'm saying that in front of the deity. If I'm lying, I get a reaction. I'm telling you, we've been given something incredibly special. We don't actually know we don't actually know the value of what we've been given. I'm telling you, I promise you. I'm saying that, I promise you, on my own life. We don't know the value of what we've been given. But I'm telling you, if we just practice it regularly, it's the gift of the ages. That's my own experience in this search for happiness. So we talked about those 4 wives, representing the different things: the body, the wealth and the possessions, the friends and the family, and we talked about how those things were all leaving. I mean, in the ancient past, they left at the time of death. Nowadays, they leave pretty quickly before that, right? Now, you can lose your wealth, your possessions, everything much earlier than that, right? So those were ancient times. But we talked about how we're not the body, we're the soul. And we talked about how your spiritual fulfillment, it's practical. It's actually your degree of fulfillment, spiritual contentment, deep joy. That's what stops you overreacting when people say something or do something that you don't like. That's what keeps you grounded, right? When things reverse in life. That's what allows us to return hatred with love, with joy. It's all contingent on building that deep spiritual joy within us. That's what allows us to keep our families and our communities together, even when there are disagreements. The spiritual ecstasy is practical. The spiritual joy, the spiritual fulfillment, the spiritual contentment, it's practical. And this is a different vision. This is the vision of the Bhagavad Gita. This is what Krishna is showing us. We've been trained in the external world to look at all the external things and not get to the root cause. Why am I taking so much offense at this person's behavior? It's because you're not content within yourself. If you were content within yourself and someone does something wrong, you would simply think it's their own issue. Don't take it seriously. But the fact that I'm so annoyed, angered, triggered by it is because there's some emptiness within me. So, what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to fill our cup. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I've been making lots of notes. So thank you very much for the Bhavana Prabhu. I'd like to take this opportunity to open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, raise your hand.
It's me again. Thank you for that class, it was amazing. I took loads of notes as well. I was listening to a podcast recently about what people think about when they're dying. So this lady that studied people dying over the last 30 years, and the biggest thing was regrets.
Yeah.
So I was just wanting your thoughts on how that all makes sense in terms of getting contentment when you're living. Yeah. But when you're going towards your latter part of your life, or even in midlife, and you have regrets, how do you deal with that as a person?
It's a very great question. I've been thinking about this. You know, there's a few things that I was meditating on. I'll share a few things and then we'll see where we go from there. The first thing I saw, again, I'm going to be very honest with you. What I saw was that for the majority of us, myself included, I saw that if our happiness was based upon what we get externally, the senses, I thought to myself, what happens as someone gets older, right? Think about that. If I've become conditioned or habituated that all my joy is about what I can do for my body, then you get older and older and older, and the body doesn't have the same ability to just get things materially. I say this because I went to visit my father-in-law. So my father-in-law had some health issues. So he was in hospital, right? So, well, I saw him before he went to hospital, but we were visiting as well. And you know, he's in his 80s and so on. And I remember thinking, wow, and again, it struck me again, the same thing, bang. It's like, what can happen is, if you just think that it's all about your senses and it happens from your senses, then when your senses can't enjoy it, could you imagine the frustration that someone can have? Could you imagine? My whole life is all my joy can only come in this way, and then the medium through which I get joy, that medium isn't working anymore. But I've got all these desires. And again, Christians show me, it's like, look, I'm showing you an opportunity. There's a way out of this. You don't have to go through that situation. And it kept coming to me, because I kept seeing this through the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. I'm showing you the long-term vision, so you can get off the roller coaster before it goes down. That's why I kept getting that sense. Then I also, to your point, I remember this verse, Ante kalichamame va, smaramutva kalevaram, ya parati samad bhavam, yati naschashasam shayaha. Krishna says, whatever one remembers at the time of death, to that situation one will attain. They did some research. You know, when planes crash, the planes will have a black box, and it will record the final moments and, you know, what happens, so that they can retrieve. So when they retrieve the crashed plane, they can actually retrieve the black box, and then they can do a post-mortem. They can understand exactly what happened, why did the plane crash, etc. What they found, very interesting. I don't know if this is for female pilots as well, but most pilots, at least the male pilots, just before they died, guess what they said? Guess who they called out for?
God.
No, mummy.
Oh.
Yeah, most of the male pilots, just before they died, they called out for mummy. Right? They called out for mummy. That really taught me something. It taught me that that's what the attachment was. It actually taught me that in many cases we're adults physically, but not necessarily emotionally. Not necessarily emotionally. And so it became more and more apparent to me that those unresolved desires would also cause one to come back again and have to go through the same cycle. But I saw that through Krishna consciousness there was another way. And the way I reconciled it is, I thought to myself, what does an unresolved desire mean? An unresolved desire means that I had the desire for something that I thought would make me happy. And it didn't happen, okay? And again, going back to our theme of deep spiritual happiness, it became clear to me, but you know what? If you're actually internally content, you actually don't care about what happened and what didn't happen, because the conclusion of what you're looking for is already with you, right? It's just like, you know, let's say that, you were looking to get a pay rise. It didn't happen, but you got another job which gave you even more money. You don't think, oh, but that previous job, I didn't get a pay rise. It's like, well, who cares? You got a new job and they're earning you more than you would have got with a pay rise anyway. No one laments it. So it became clear to me that the way to overcome unresolved desires is to achieve the goal of every desire. And the goal of every desire is to be happy. It became clear to me that if I achieved that deep happiness, then the desires that I had attained, the desires that I hadn't attained, there would all be a detachment from that, because I'm only looking for those desires because it'll make me happy. I was giving a class and I was telling the audience, imagine someone said to you that I will give you a pay rise and you can become famous, wealthy, but on one condition. You have to sign a contract to say that I can give you all these things, but you have to sign to say that along with all these things, you will never have any positive emotions. would you sign that contract?
No.
No. Isn't it? Because the only reason why we want those things is because we think those things are going to give us a positive internal experience. If someone says, I'll give you all the money, but you have to sign this contract that you will have no positive emotions as a result of it, no one's going to do it. That really taught me something. The desires are means to an end. We're not looking for desires for the sake of desires. We're looking at desires for the sake of actually being happy and content. So what I saw from the Bhagavad Gita is, why don't you just jump to the conclusion of it all? Why don't you just go for the direct thing that's going to give you the deep, lasting contentment? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just making me think about lamenting the past.
Yeah.
All of this. I think when it's material stuff, it's easier to get through it, but when it's emotional stuff, it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
So very family things or things unsaid,
Yeah.
and all those kind of things, then it's more difficult for the mind to manage that.
Just want to say something on that because I think it's a great point. And again, being very transparent in my own life, what I often saw, I saw a formula. There's two parts to this formula. The first part of the formula is I saw that I should always try to act my best, to do my best in any situation, in any relationship. And then that was part one. Plus, I should remember that Krishna is my well-wisher. He really loves me. And then what I saw, as long as I had that formula in life, that I was doing the best that I can, and I remembered that Krishna loves me, then whatever conclusion came out of that, I knew that must be the best conclusion. You know, there's a story that my spiritual master used to tell, which relates to this. There was a king and his advisor. And one day the king was given a gift, and he was given a very, very expensive sword with gold, jewels, everything like that, extremely expensive. And the king was really happy. And so he said to his advisor, look, I've been given this sword, very, very valuable, precious jewels. And the advisor said, wow, it's amazing. One day the king was cleaning his sword. And while he was cleaning his sword, he cut his finger. He was in real pain. That's so painful. And the king said to his advisor, I was cleaning this sword. I was just refining it, cleaning it, and I've cut my finger. I'm in so much pain. And the king said to his advisor, he said, what do you have to say about this? And the advisor said, my dear king, this must be Krishna's mercy. And the king's like, what? Are you crazy? How dare you say that to me? I'm in pain. You're saying that because it didn't happen to you. And the king was so angry. He called the guards. He said, guards, tell this foolish advisor of mine that he's a nonsense and throw him in jail. And the guards immediately grabbed the advisor and threw him in jail. And the king felt, I've shown him. Like, how dare you say that to me? And then later that day, the king went on his tour of the kingdom. And so, as the king was going on his tour of the kingdom, at one point, as his tour was going, it was going through the forest. In that forest, there were a group of cannibals. And they captured the king, right? They actually captured him. They brought him to the priest. They're cannibals, so they eat humans. They looked at the king, they thought, it's prasadam time, right? They were going to eat the king. So the priest said, right, let's prepare him for the human sacrifice, and then we can divide him up, right? Lunch is on the menu, right? So they were engaging in this sacrifice. They were about to sacrifice the king. Just before the sacrifice ended, the shaman for that group said, stop. Like the priest said, stop. And everyone's like, maybe prasadam's going to be delayed today, right? He said, stop. He said, let this person go. And they're like, what are you talking about? Why? Like, we don't understand. He said, we can't sacrifice him. He said, look at his hand. He said, part of his hand is missing. He's an incomplete specimen, so we can't use him in the sacrifice. Let him go. So they had to let the king go. The king was completely relieved, ran back to his palace. When he got back to his palace, the king became a bit thoughtful, and he realized, he said, actually, hold on. He said, I made a big mistake. He told the guards, he said, bring my advisor out of the prison, release him and bring him to me. The advisor came to see the king, and the king he apologized. He said to the advisor, he said, when I cut my finger and I asked you about it, you said it was Krishna's mercy, and I was so angry with you. He said, but I realized later on that you were right. He said, I was captured by these cannibals. They were going to sacrifice me and eat me, but because of the color of my finger, they let me go. You know, so I now see how true, how correct you were, that this coloring of my finger, this actually was Krishna's mercy. And I'm so sorry that I treated you like this. He said, but the king said to him, but I do have one question. He said, I do have one question. He said, I understand now how me cutting my finger was Krishna's mercy upon me. Like that part I get. He said to his wife, he said, but the thing I don't understand is that when you told me that, I became angry with you and had you thrown in prison. So I understand how cutting my finger was Krishna's mercy upon me, but I don't understand how it was Krishna's mercy upon you. And the advisor said to the king, he said, my dear king, he said, when you go for a tour of the kingdom, he said, normally I accompany you. So, I would have accompanied you, they would have let you go, and they would have sacrificed me instead. He said, so therefore, when you cut your finger, that was Krishna's mercy upon you. And when I told you that, and you had me thrown in prison, that was Krishna's mercy upon me. So it sometimes requires us to see the bigger picture. And sometimes even the so-called challenges that we have, if we're doing our best, this is that why the formula comes in. If we're doing our best, plus we understand that Krishna is kind, then if we have a wider perspective of things, then we will understand that with that formula, if I've done my best, then whatever the outcome, it is ultimately the best, even if it seems challenging in some way, shape, or form. The example that comes to mind is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's many examples. The example of the Pandavas. There's the example of a king called King Anga. He has a son called Vena, who's a very cruel king. And so what happens is he tries to reform his son. It doesn't work. And Prabhupada writes in a purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam that what had happened was Krishna wanted that King Anga to prepare to go back to Godhead. So he had allowed him to have a son of that nature, so he would renounce the kingdom and prepare himself to go back to the spiritual world. So again, we don't always see the full end-to-end story. And sometimes even when something seems negative, we don't actually know the trouble or the difficulties that we are being saved or which are being minimized in that situation. But it depends upon us doing our best in Krishna consciousness and the remembrance, the understanding that the person who's ultimately in control, Krishna, he's our well-wisher. So as long as I'm doing my best, actually, ultimately, whatever happens as a result is ultimately auspicious. Thank you for your question.
One more, okay.
I've really loved everything you've said today, but I am in a little bit of a dilemma. So the dilemma is that, you know, I'm following Krishna consciousness. I'm living in the material world.
Join the club.
Part of me thinks I want to continue enjoying the material world, and maybe when I'm old and my senses don't give me the fulfillment I want, then I'll go deeper into my spiritual practice at that time. And, you know, I'm trying to get the best of both worlds.
And the question is?
I get the fact that, you know, you've explained, go straight to the end result where you're going to get deep fulfillment in your heart. But at the same time, I'm keeping one foot in both camps, and I'm struggling in moving into just one camp and not keeping 50-50.
Yeah. In fact, can I make a comment to that? First of all, I really appreciate your honesty. I really understand that and relate to that. And I think it's a situation the vast majority of people are in. So I was meditating on this over some years. And the realization that I was given is that there's a third way. So some people think it's about a foot in the material world. Some people think it's about a foot in the spiritual world. But there's a third way. The third way is, let's think of this as an analogy. The third way is to consider that you can have both feet in the spiritual world and you can experience the spiritual world through the material world. I'll explain what I mean by that. So in this room, in this building, there are so many different things, okay? So tables, there's books, there's microphones, there's different paraphernalia here. What I understand is the actual message of the Bhagavad Gita is that actually we're meant to be using everything as a medium of affection for Krishna. So it's not that we're renouncing this is all material, we go away from it. And it's not that we're just saying, this is all material and let me try and enjoy my senses with it. But rather, it's understanding that this belongs to Krishna. So I'm going to use everything that he's allowing me to have in my vicinity as a medium through which I will offer love to him. You see? So it's like this. There's a book that my spiritual master wrote, and he's talking about relationships. He said that we should see our partner, our families, as being a gift from Krishna. And the idea in our relationships is that the love that's coming through them, we should understand is ultimately coming from Krishna. And our job is to offer that love back to Krishna through them. So if I see that everyone is part of Krishna's family, then I'm offering love and devotion to Krishna by serving them with devotion, offering them Krishna consciousness. If I see that this is coming from Krishna, because this all the materials here, this is no one, some man or some person, let's say, man or woman, made this, but they made this out of raw materials which have come from nature. Nature doesn't come from human beings. Nature comes from Krishna. He's the source of everything. So this is ultimately coming from him. So now, let me use this as a medium through which I offer affection back to him. So it's not about rejecting the material. It's not about enjoying the material. It's about serving Krishna through the paraphernalia that we call this material world. There was a story of a king, and he was so unhappy because he just wanted to serve his spiritual master. And so he was miserable, and his spiritual master came to visit him, and he said, like, you look so unhappy. What's wrong? And the king said, I have to look after this kingdom. There's all this politics and stuff I've got to deal with. It's such a headache, but really in my heart, all I want to do is to serve you, Gurudev. And the spiritual master thought about it for a moment and said, okay, I've got a solution. He said, look, from now on, I'm going to take your kingdom, but give your kingdom to me, and you can just serve me. That's all you have to do. And the king was so relieved. Wow, thank you so much. Take it. The king, this is all yours, Guru Maharaj. The kingdom's yours. He said, I'll just serve you. And the spiritual master said, thank you. Right, so you've given me the kingdom? And the king said, yes, the kingdom is yours. And the king said to his spiritual master, please, what can I do to serve you? And the spiritual master looked at the king and said, I want you to go and sit on my throne and run my kingdom for me. Sit on the throne and run my kingdom for me. And it seems like in one sense he's gone into the same situation, but actually it was a change in consciousness. It was that understanding, it's not my kingdom. It's my Guru's kingdom, or we can say Krishna's kingdom. And I'm using it I'm running it as a service. I'm using it as a medium to give love and devotion to Krishna. That is what I would say is the third way. It's a change in consciousness, but I would also add that change in consciousness is sustained and fixed by the regular reading of the Bhagavad Gita, the regular chanting of the holy names of Krishna, and the regular association of devotees. That's what allows us to be fixed in that perception. And in that perception, we will be able to run the kingdom better than we would normally, but without becoming attached or dependent on the kingdom. And we will get a spiritual joy even though we're interacting with so many external things. That would be the solution to the issue. Does that make sense to you? Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you. So, thank you very much.
We'll say time for one more question.
One
or-
more?
Yeah, there's a hand on over this side. So do you, and then we can, if there's time.
Yeah, this time.
This time? Okay.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna,
Krishna.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to ask you a question. This is not from me, but I just want to ask, is Krishna conscious a cult?
It depends on what you mean by that. So let me just explain. That's a good question, first of all. In the negative sense, absolutely not. The word cult actually, in the traditional usage, was short for culture. Yeah. So when it says, and so if you look especially at traditional texts, English texts, I'm not even speaking about Vedic or Eastern texts. If you look at traditional English usage of the language, they'll talk about a cult of blacksmiths or a cult of traders, because it's actually meant to mean a grouping or a culture. So Krishna consciousness, it is actually the original spiritual culture. So if you mean by cult, culture, then absolutely. But if you mean by it something which is, let's say, where there's blind following, where there's a lack of knowledge and understanding, then to be honest, it's so interesting. If you look at our main books, you have the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is what? It is questions and answers. It is Arjuna asking questions to Krishna. Krishna, why should I do this? What's the idea behind that? And then Krishna saying, look, this is the reason why. And interestingly enough, after Krishna has given all the instructions, what does he say to Arjuna? He says, now that you have all these instructions, you deliberate upon it and make your own decision. It is completely the opposite of someone being blindly coerced to do anything. It's giving a very clear understanding and then saying, with this full understanding, now you make your decision about how to act. That's Bhagavad Gita. If you look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, what is it? It is questions and answers between who? Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit, right? So many sages. Why am I here? What's the purpose of life, etc.? What is the highest religion? Parodharmo, right? And all these questions and answers that are there. If you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, so many personalities inquiring from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So if you actually look at the teachings objectively, it is literally diametrically opposed to what people would be considered to be cultish behavior where there's blind following. In fact, one of the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, Tadvide Pratena Priprasnena Sevaya Upadekshanti Te Gyanam Gyaninas Tatvadashinaha. What does Krishna say? He says, approach a bona fide spiritual master, but he doesn't stop there. He said, what do you do when you approach a bona fide spiritual master? You said, inquire. Inquire, ask him questions. Don't just blindly accept, ask him. And then, get a clear understanding. In the purport to that particular verse, Prabhupada explains absurd inquiries and blind following, both things are condemned. Condemned. Now contrast that. What we see what we see generally is, in many cases, in a general societal level, people actually follow blindly. Not to put it in a bad way, but if I asked you, right, we all have a doctor, right? If I asked you, how do you know that he's qualified or she's qualified? How many of you have actually asked for their credentials and looked at the medical certificates? No one's done it. No one's done it, So sometimes people are materialistic, not you, but some people, they'll, why are you accepting this? But if you dig into it, they accept everything every day with absolutely no proof. None. And then people ask that question when it comes to spiritual life. Even though if spiritual life is done properly, the beauty of spiritual life that I've seen, if it's done properly, not only do you get a clear understanding, not only are the teachings logical, but you can apply the experiment in your own life and you can directly see that it works. That's the beauty of it. It's such a powerful thing. It's like a meal. Someone tells you that this meal tastes really sweet. You can say, well, how do you know this? And that? It's like, well, why don't you just get a spoon and eat some of it? So it's like someone giving you the instructions about the meal, but then you put the food in your mouth. It's like, actually, you're right. It's really, really sweet. So this is the quality of Krishna consciousness. It is ultimately something to be experienced. Again, Machita Madhgata Prana. Bodhiyanta Paraspram Katayantascha Mamnityam Tusyanticha Ramanticha. My devotees are they're experiencing, not that they're being told. They are experiencing great bliss and satisfaction from enlivening one another about me. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Adhyatma Vidya, Vidyanam. He says, of sciences, I am the supreme science of self-realization. So we are a culture, but if it's done properly, it's the furthest away from blind following that you can possibly imagine. It's not blind following, it's clear realization and experience. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you.